I want to talk about how I became a software developer back in 2019. Before I get into that, if you're interested in connecting with a community of other developers, if you're interested in getting a system design diagram that you made reviewed by other developers, including myself, or if you have code that you want to see reviewed, or honestly, if you just want to talk about programming in general, you can join my Discord and connect with other people who are also a part of this community on this channel. So let's get into this. So I became a software developer in 2019, and this was before the turbulent year of 2020. But 2019 was interesting because I started out doing an internship before I got a full-time job. And the way I went about this was I actually started with a major in IT management. And this was in the business department. So it meant that I was taking a lot of business classes. So I took finance, accounting, marketing. What else did I take? Some general business classes, management, and IT classes. And IT was basically networking, database administration, data and analytics, data visualizations. And it wasn't so programming heavy, certainly not as much as you would get in more of a traditional computer science degree. But what I discovered that there was a specific track within this major that was for application development. And with that, I was able to take C Sharp and web development. And so I, at the time, didn't really have an interest to do math, physics, chemistry, and all that stuff that goes along with a science degree. I really wanted to just focus on programming. And at the time, I did have an interest in some of the business classes, honestly, except for accounting. I still don't like accounting. And so I chose to go that route, and I was happy with it. And my freshman year, when you're doing all like the planning and you're charting out your schedule and your course load, I think I had about 15 credit hours, 15, 16, something like that. But there was no programming. And so I started to look ahead at my schedule, and I started to worry a little bit because I was afraid that, I knew that I was, thinking at the time that I wanted to go into mobile app development, and I was afraid that if I didn't get a degree in computer science, I wasn't going to be able to get a job in development. And so I started to kind of panic a little bit at this point because I looked at my schedule and I just didn't see a lot of programming classes that were on the schedule. So I actually switched my major to computer science when I was going into my sophomore year. And this turned out to be a little bit of a mistake because to be honest, I really wasn't even thinking about what the impact it would do to like just starting a CS degree sophomore year and how delayed I would be and behind, and also how intensive of credit hours I would have to take each semester. But also, I don't think I wasn't looking at the whole picture good enough. I wasn't looking at all the classes that I could have taken in IT, including some programming classes. I just had in my head, and from just researching online and just seeing all the traditional advice of like go to computer science, get a computer science degree, and then go get a development job. I just read that and internalized that, and I convinced myself that that's what I need to do, despite the fact that I didn't want to do math at all or physics or any of that. So I switched, and then ultimately I switched back. I switched back to IT. I got a different advisor, and my new advisor helped me out a lot to better plan my course load for the rest of my 3 years. And with that, I learned of a web development class that I would be able to take my senior year that was going to cover C Sharp and .NET. And I learned that I was also going to be in a C Sharp programming class my junior year. And so when I kind of realized this, and I spoke with somebody who actually helped me in a way where, I just, in a better way, it really helped me put me on what I think was the correct path for me. Because I think academic advisors are so important because they're there to help you create your schedule in order to meet your, whatever your end goal is. For me, it was to be in some kind of software development. And so by better creating my schedule and taking on the classes that were better suited towards me, it put me in a better spot where I felt comfortable with my schedule, and also it put me in a better spot where I could get the job that I wanted, which is really the ultimate goal of college. And so when I switched back into IT, I also learned something else. I learned that I could also take elective classes from the CS, that were CS classes, and add them to my course load where I had the space. So I added a C++ programming class into my course load too. And that was really, really beneficial because I didn't know, one, that I could take just other classes that were outside of my department and add them in and take them. So I was like, okay, well, I can just add in the programming classes that I want to take on top of my major coursework. And that works perfect. And I'm super glad I did that. And it was a really, really unique experience because I was the only IT major in that class. And so I felt like I had a little bit different approach in terms of how I looked at programming, because I was always looking at it more from the business perspective rather than just like the raw theory and science of it. So I really value that perspective of the business side of programming, because that's a lot of it, I feel like, is what it reduces down to, is the business value that your applications add. And so as I charted out, I went through my sophomore year, junior year, and by the time I was beginning to transition from sophomore to junior year, I began to get a lot more serious about my personal projects and actually took into my own hands, learning programming when I didn't have specifically programming classes. So I started to create and learn iOS development. I started to follow along from a tutorial book to learn Swift and create iOS applications. And I started doing this a lot. I spent a lot of time at the library. I spent a lot of additional time just following along, making these applications, whether they were GPS location applications to find your car, or whether they were just simple, call a weather API. Just basic stuff to get me familiar and comfortable with Swift and Xcode. And this is really where a lot of it started for me. I started to get serious about, okay, how am I going to take these personal projects and leverage them in order to get a job and to better help me get a software development job, despite the fact that I don't have a CS degree? Because that still was in my head. I still saw myself at a potential deficit due to the fact that I wasn't in CS. I knew that skill-wise I could definitely get there. I just probably had to put a little bit of additional work in on top of my my core studies at school. So I really got serious about it when I was at the tail end of my sophomore year into my junior year. And during this, when I was learning iOS and Swift, I also started to make a personal portfolio website on Wix. And I started to do that, and I started to add my GitHub projects on my personal portfolio website. I started to figure out how to talk about my personal projects on my resume, how to list the technologies, and how to honestly just pick projects that allow me to use the technologies that I wanted to learn. So as I started to get further and further into iOS, it was at this time that I also took my first C# programming class. And once I took that, then I started to make more C# console apps myself. I started to make just kind of small C# programs to solve algorithms or, really whatever. And I did a lot of this on my own time. And again, I listed this on my portfolio website and also my resume. And it was also during this time, my junior year, when I was doing all this personal project stuff, that I tried to look for my first internship. And this was a many-month process, many months of applying, hearing back from not a lot of them, and interviewing, failing the interviews. I actually got a couple technical interviews, and I failed miserably one of the programming assessments, and I actually got to the last phase of one internship. That would have been an iOS development internship, but I didn't get it. I got to the very last phase. It was me and another person, and they offered it to the other person. So I just was striking out at every corner. I just couldn't get a internship for the summer, and I knew it was very important at this time to have an internship going into my senior year. So I was starting to panic a little bit, and I finally I finally got an email back about one internship that, to be honest, I had forgotten I had applied to a while ago. And this was a week before I was this summer was happening after junior year. This summer was happening. This summer was starting. So this was during finals week, and the only thing that I wasn't like the only thing that wasn't super excited about was that it was an IT internship specifically. So it wasn't programming, it was like IT support and, fixing computers and that kind of thing. So, but it was at a reputable company. So I went through the interview process and I ended up getting that offer. So I did that internship during the summer. But during this time, I also continued on my personal projects, and I actually took advantage of my iOS development experience to help me make an iOS application that I was able to use at work during this internship that I showed my boss. So I feel like I was able to blend my personal projects with my internship, and I was able to get experience talking about a project that I was working on, showing it to somebody, and receiving feedback. So, despite the fact that it was an IT internship, I still got some principles out of it that related to software development, and I applied what I was working on my own time to work. And I feel like that really paid off because I was able to talk about that on my resume, but I was able to talk about it in a way where it made it seem, you know, I was able to talk about it in a way where I learned that, it's not just the things that you're given at work that count. It's really how are you going kind of above like what's expected. Now you don't have to always do that, but that was really a principle that I learned, and I felt like it really paid off in terms of getting my foot in the door into software development. It was just to look for opportunities where I could learn something new or talk to people that I could learn from. And so that internship was interesting because it was really like my first foot in the door professionally in terms of any technology job. So that internship ended and I went into my senior year, and I really just ramped up everything I was doing with personal projects. At this time, I got iOS applications in the App Store. I started making my portfolio website just better and better, and I started to really get serious about C Sharp and .NET. And it was at this time I started the web development course in school, and this is where I learned how to make CRUD applications. And so I took that and then I made my own kind of social media site, and I connected it with an iOS application I had made, and I linked them to a Firebase NoSQL database where both of them will be updated upon update to the database. So that was really, really cool, and I was able to take that and put it on my resume. So again, it's just taking personal projects and I just continued working on them as much as I could, as much time as I could put to them. I knew that it would pay off in terms of helping me get a full-time job. And so I graduated, and the interesting thing was that I was moving in 4 months. And so I knew that I couldn't get a full-time position, right? Because I can't stay there just for 4 months. So I originally tried to look for a remote job, and I was not getting them. I was not hearing back. I, would get contacted to set up an interview and then I wouldn't hear back. I would go through a round or two of interviews and then get rejected. So I was just not getting anything. I had no leads or anything. So finally I had to look for another internship. And so I went through another internship program that I had got an offer to, but this one was specifically in software development. So I learned more C Sharp and .NET. And it was a really, really good experience because it was my first professional setting where I was doing .NET development. So it was good experience. I could list up my resume. And so out of that internship, towards the end, I started to apply to jobs again. And it was the same story. It was the same, just not hearing back from majority of places. I set up interviews. I went through the interviews. I wouldn't hear back. I would get rejected. And I just could not find a remote position. I was just not finding any remote jobs. I wasn't getting contacted for them when I applied. So I just I knew that I wasn't going to get something remote, at least not out of the gate out of school. So I ended up applying to one position. It was in office, and I got an offer there doing C Sharp and .NET development. And so that's what I took, and that was my first job in this career. Again, it was in office 5 days a week, pretty traditional job. And honestly, I was excited because that was my first full time software development position. And so that's the route. That's the route I took to get from school to become a full time software developer. It was again, I didn't do computer science. I did information technology management. I worked on a lot of personal projects, and that's probably my biggest advice is to just keep working on them despite, maybe it doesn't feel like they're helping, maybe it doesn't feel like you're learning from it. Just try to make unique and creative personal projects that you can list and talk about on your resume. And I just did that for about 3 years, and I think it paid off. Now, again, there's more routes you can take. You can do a boot camp, you can do CS, computer engineering, electrical engineering, you can do really whatever major. It's just about how do you get the programming skills, how do you get the software development skills, and how do you get the skills of thinking about a system as a whole. And I feel like one of the things that I learned from the business department that pertains to software development is just thinking about the system as it relates to the business. And also in terms of, we're not writing code for the sake of just writing something cool or using the latest and greatest technologies, right? We're writing something to add value somewhere. We're writing something to create value at whatever company it may be. And so being able to think about a system design and how it fits into the broader context of a business is something that I feel like I got out of going through a business route to get to software development. Now I'm sure you can get that through a computer science degree too, but I'm just telling you the route that I took. So again, there's a lot of routes, but there's I just don't think that there's one definitive way you can get to software development. There's a lot of different ways. So let me know what if you've experienced a different way to get to a full-time software development position. I've heard of a number of other ways to do it as well. I feel like anybody can do it for sure. And yeah, but again, if you are interested in talking about development, software development, system design, programming with other people, feel free to join my Discord. I have a link in the description if you want to. So that's all I got for today. I'll see you on the next one.